indeed pleasure to be here. I'm humbled. So many learned, experienced people. I try and share about our journey of last 14, 15 years in working with farmers in parts of India. I was working with Indian Council of Agricultural Research as a scientist. And in the college, when we were studying, we were told that there's a lot of technologies which can solve the farmers' problem. When we have seen around the college, there were a large number of farmers societies happening. In 86, I joined BSc Agriculture, Bapatla, Andhra Pradesh. That's where actually the first farmer society started in 1986-87. So I saw a lot of disconnect between the two, what we study in the college and then what we see in the field. We grew up like that, studying in the college that there's a lot of technology which can be taken to the farmer and then it can solve the problems. And by the time I joined PhD in IIM, Pusa, New Delhi, more and more reading about Indian agriculture or Indian economy, particularly preparing for the civil services. See, there's a lot of disconnect in what we think, what we do, and we never connect our own thinking with what we observe. So what we observe is different, and then what we read is different, what we think is different, and we live in that contradictions. We continue to live in that contradiction. We never try and resolve those issues. So, continue with that contradiction because I feel we are made to live like that. One incident I would say which actually made me to rethink a lot about why I should deal with these contradictions. We were doing an event in Busan called the Joy of Learning Festival. पढ़ाई कैसे आसान हो सकता है? How you can enjoy learning? We were trying to do that. We got children from all over the country, from non-municipal areas, and then we were working with them to take to different institutions and explain how these institutions work. There was a girl who was in about 6th class at that time, and she was with us in one of the team members, and then I was explaining her how IRI works for farmers and what we developed, what the technologies, how we work and all. And I asked her a question: what do you think of your school and what do you think of your teachers? The teachers तो कुछ बोलते हैं, but सुनते नहीं. And I was very surprised. Why do you think so? Don't you think going to school you enjoy? He said, nice sir. Teacher कुछ बोलते हैं, but if we ask any questions, you will not answer. I said, why? Then he said, my science teacher says, sun is a god, sun is a planet. But the next class, my Hindi teacher says, sun is a god. And I asked my teacher, if there is a question in the exam, who is sun, what do they write? And the question, the way she told me, it really pinched me a lot. It's a naive question. She didn't want to tease the teacher. It was a simple contradiction. One teacher is saying this, one teacher is saying that. Teacher told, if it is a science exam, write it as a planet. If it is a Hindi exam, you write it as a god. Teacher resolved that, that's why she became teacher. Otherwise, she would have dropped herself in the school itself. I think that's something which kept me haunting for a while, and in fact, I took my civil services in social sciences. So I was studying sociology. There was a very famous book, probably many of you might have read, Ivan Illich's Deschooling Society, which says how you are made to think in a particular way, and what you observe, you don't try to contradict. Because society wants conformists. And that made me think and then look at my own research happening in Indian Agricultural Research Institution and what is happening there. Then I realized when I was talking to the people, see what we observe in the villages, many of the people also came from agricultural background, they know what is happening in the villages, but what they read in the colleges is very different. But they live with that. They live with that. That this model of agriculture is not making money for the farmers, but still when they tell the colleges that it is the way to go forward. They know that their fathers and their mothers are not making good living over there, the same model of agriculture they are adopting, but still they want to promote kind. So that's contradictions kind of thing. So living in those contradictions, once I got through the civil services, I felt I should not continue with that. Then got into research service and then start working with the agricultural farmers and I joined in ICR and then started working there. 97, again there was a large spate of farmer suicides in Warangal district, if you remember, and it was a very large number of farmer suicides. And that's the time when I was actually, so I joined as a scientist, but at the same time I was also part of several movements in the state, farmers movements, weavers movements and the thing. Some of the very good friends of mine were working with the weavers. So they came with a proposition, weavers are committing suicides, farmers are also committing suicides. Can we work together to understand what is the issue and how to look at it? And that's the starting of my journey with alternative thinking. And we went to the villages, we have seen one of the major reasons was about increasing cost of cultivation, technology failures, lot of technology failures, but still believe that technology someday will solve the problem. And so we brought up a publication at that time. It was called Story of Cotton, the Tragedy of Indian Agriculture. And if I look back, I feel the story of cotton is the story of Indian agriculture. India knew how to grow cotton, how to weave cotton before the world knew it. When the world was wearing leaves and hides, Indians were wearing cottons. Evidence, history shows that. But unfortunately, in the name of modernization, we got into learning from West and discarding everything what we had. And that's the time we thought we should try out something alternative in agriculture. So we started working with farmers groups and all, and during the process, several villages we were volunteering and then trying to do to bring about the change. And 2004 again we saw a large spate of farmer suicides. I think as per the government of India's records, it was more than 4,000 in Andhra, Telangana together. And that's the time when the government changed and several things happened at that time. And we thought that we should come together and then start an institution. That's how CSA was born. Center for Sustainable Agriculture was born at that time. And during that time, we also have seen across the country there are wonderful models which were established. People tried out several alternatives. We have not invented anything, we have not discovered anything, but there were people who were trying out innovations. The problem was that all those innovations were locked up as islands of success. Even today, you may see many such models. They get caught up in few isolated pockets, mainly because they are also caught up in their own ideologies, in their own thinking, and not to change, not to adapt to other situations. Because situations vary from region to region. Situations vary from region to region. When situations vary from region to region, the socio-economic conditions of people vary from region to region, we also need to adapt it to the local situations. When we are not trying to adapt to the situations, we want to be the way we are and guarded by our own ideologies, it becomes very difficult for them to spread. So that's where we started working on how we can take it to the large scale. That's our journey began, and that's how we designed our model of working. And in this process, what we understood is, while we are talking about agrarian crisis, there's a large crisis which is over there, and if you see the records is about 3.2 lakh farmers who have committed suicide in the last 21 years of government records. Government started documenting only from 95 onwards, and from 95 till date, if you see, as per the government, the National Crime Records Bureau, it is 3.2 lakh farmers who have committed suicide, which means about 15,000 every year. Average 15,000 every year, 48 a day. Every half an hour there is a death happening at one part of the country or other. And the crisis we need to understand, if we go deeply, there are 4 dimensions to the problem. One major dimension is the economic dimension. There is an increasing cost of cultivation, and the prices are not increasing to that extent. Increasing costs, and then prices not increasing to the extent, and at the same time government support to the agriculture is coming up. So if you put these 3 things together, there is an increasing cost, but the prices are not increasing, but the government support is coming down. So farmer is getting into a negative balance. And in a situation where government support is minimal, people depend on private players, and that increases their indebtedness. So that's a simple thing which is happening with the village level. There is a deep economic crisis, and if you go by the National Sample Survey 2014 report, average farmer in India has more than about I think near about 60,000-70,000 rupees as a loan, and Andhra Pradesh has the pride of having more than 1.2 lakhs per household indebted. And 92% of the farmers in Andhra Pradesh are indebted. That's what the National Sample Survey says. So that's a deep economic crisis. And coming to the costs of cultivation, the data says 2,400 rupees is the quintal of paddy production. 2,400 is the quintal of paddy production. And the price fixed by government is 1,450 this year. I'm talking about 2016-17. So you don't need a big economist to say that farmers are making losses. So when your own data says it's the cost of production is 2,400 rupees and your price fixation is about 1,450. We read all these in the newspapers. It's not that this data is hidden somewhere, it is all in front of us. The other one is the ecological crisis, where we are using more and more chemical pesticides, we are using more and more water, groundwater, we are digging out groundwater, and we are getting into more and more water intensive crops. We are using more and more herbicides. So we are going into a kind of ecological crisis, and that has led to the severe situations where what you see today, the Punjab cancer, if you look at the increasing cancer in Punjab, decreasing groundwater levels. So all these are fallout of that high input use in agriculture. That's the ecological dimension of the problem. And the fallout of that ecological crisis is also about the food contamination which you get, the severe pesticide residues which you get. The other third dimension of the problem is the socio-political crisis. The census data between 2001 and 2011, the data says more than 9 lakh families have left farming, and their numbers are increasing. And the population which is depending on cultivation is coming down, and the population which is depending on agricultural workers is increasing, which essentially means farmers, more and more farmers are becoming agricultural workers. It makes sense to be a worker than own a farm and do a cultivation. So that's a situation in which there is a shift happening. Also added to this, more and more we are seeing there is a landowners are not doing farming, but the people who don't own land are getting into farming, which is leading to tenancy. So assets and production resources are with someone, but actually the practice is done by someone. That also is creating a situation. So in the last 30-40 years, these changes which have come in were never acknowledged. As a result, we didn't make any change in our policies. We never made any changes in our approach. What 30 years back it was, what 40 years back it was, we continued with it. And whenever there is a problem which was brought before the government, they never looked into it. So if you put all these 3-4 things together and then see, on the top of that, now we have the climate change, whether fluctuations and then increasing droughts and floods fluctuations. If you put all these three things together, what we can come to in these three, four things is the relationships are broken. Basically, the farmers and nature, that relationship is completely broken. We feel we can do cultivation the way we like. We can put in more water and then get more yield, put in more chemicals and get more things. And if there is an insect, I can spray anything. As if everything is in my control. I don't need to depend on nature. I don't learn from nature. So that's one relationship which is broken. Second relationship which is broken also is the farmer and consumer. If you look at farmer and consumer, we are all always want safe food. But safe food comes, food should be safer, healthier. But safe food and healthy food comes only if it is grown. So we all know that we are what we eat. But what we eat is what is grown. What is applied to the plant is what you come to get into your plant. But we never look into that. We never worry about what is happening to the farming. Say for example, there was a report released by Center for Science and Environment, down to earth published a report saying colas had pesticide residues. We were all worried about 2 days and then later we forgot about it. But where did colas get their pesticide residues? It was because it was used in agriculture. If colas had pesticide residues, the water which is supplied by Delhi Gel Board also must be having the pesticide residues. They also come from the same region. So whatever pesticides which are used around Meerut, where does they go? Whatever pesticides which are used around Delhi, where does they go? They are coming to your water. We never worry about that. Similarly, in 2002, if I remember, we were traveling through Punjab. In fact, I thought of showing some of these photographs. We were traveling through Punjab in 2002, where farmers were actually leading the land. After the Kharif harvest and before Rabi, they were just leading the land and then they were burning the entire straw. So paddy straw was burned and then they were taking the next wheat crop. So we were asking them, why do you do this? They said, क्या सर इसमें बहुत खर्च होती है, if you had to put in labor, it's very costly. So we brought to the notice of Punjab government that can we actually work on this? We need to cut it down. Because that year, if I remember, the total money which was invested on chemical fertilizer subsidy was 1,20,000 crores, which is about 15% of Indian budget, and 11% of that goes to Punjab. You can just imagine the 1,20,000 crores, 11% goes to Punjab, and Punjab is only 1% of the total cultivated area in India. And the most efficient utilization of chemical fertilizers is about 30%. So 70% goes into your drain, which spoils your groundwater, and then soils. The rest of it is taken up by the plant. And in there, you are harvesting only the grain. Rest of it you are burning it. Rather than that, why can't you put it back? So you are actually burning your subsidy as well. It's not just burning straw, you are burning your subsidy as well. Also, it used to be like this. It's not dark. Around 3 o'clock, if you go in August, it used to be like this. It's not dark. So we said, this is too much. Can we intervene and then do it? So we suggested, can we work with farmers in terms of helping them to compost? Then farmers said it is costlier. So can government support them so that can be done easily? Because they are unable to afford. Because the kind of prices which farmers were getting was low, so they couldn't invest on that. Government didn't do anything, they just put a ban. But bans will not help. They continued, and fallout you have seen last year. When Delhi became darker, then we just woke up and said, oh, what do we do? The smog in Delhi, how did it came? In fact, in 2002, Nature has published an article that it's going to happen. So we all knew that. And today it came out to Delhi, it wanted to go to other places as well. All things are happening there. So these interrelationships between what is happening in the rural areas and what is happening in urban areas, we never worry about. One more example. Last year, all the newspapers were talking about the drought in Maharashtra. where there was no water able to drink, and then Arvind Kejriwal has sent a train of water. How many of you remember how much water the train has carried? Can anyone remember that? It had about 12 lakh liters of water. So 5 lakh liters of water in each train. There were 12 bogies, so it was about 5 lakh liters which was carried. And you know, 12 such trains are required to grow 1 acre of paddy. 1 acre of paddy requires 12 such trains to grow. And it takes about 15 such trains to grow 1 acre of sugar cane. And in Latur and around the area, they continue to grow the same crop. When they exhaust water, and then we want to send water from here. So unless you bring in that change there, you cannot solve the problem. How long are you going to continue with that? And similarly, what is our role in that? We continue to eat rice only, but we want farmers not to grow rice. That will also not happen. So that relationship. So these relationships, how do we rebuild? So that farmers can understand the nature, the natural processes, and adapt to the change. Similarly, how consumers can understand and then make a change so that these relationships can be rebuilt. That's where we started our work as Center for Sustainable Agriculture. We started in Andhra Pradesh. And the very first issue we picked up was the pesticides. Pesticides because Andhra Pradesh was the third largest user of chemical pesticides at that point of time in 2004. And many farmers were getting hospitalized, workers and farmers were getting hospitalized when the pesticides were sprayed. And the food we are eating was also having pesticides. And the cost of cultivation, about 20% was going for pesticides. So that was the scenario in which we saw. And we thought we should try and reduce the pesticide use. Not a magical solution, simple way of understanding how insects behave. To tell you a simple example, in all our houses we see mosquitoes. How does mosquitoes get into your home? All of us have read in the school that mosquitoes breed in stagnated waters. So breeding ground is stagnated waters. As long as you continue with your breeding ground, you cannot avoid mosquitoes. So whatever mosquito coils you use or mosquito vapors you use, that will only poison the entire room, but that will not help you to kill mosquitoes unless you address the source. Simple logic is that. So what we try is, for every insect, every crop, we try to understand the crop ecosystem and then try to help farmers to understand that better. Rather than telling them what to spray or what to do, try to tell them how to understand. I think that's the key thing for a change. If you understand, you can practice it. So all these years, what we tried in ICR, Indian Agricultural Research or Department of Agriculture, is that farmers unemployed, illiterate, they don't understand. So we tell them what to grow, how to grow, kind of things, rather than telling them how to understand their resources and then how to manage them. So that's where actually there was a failure. So we thought we should talk to them, work with them, build a knowledge base so that they can decide. They can decide for themselves. And very quickly we could get few villages which were pesticide free, like what the first time when Sopan came, that's where actually first time I met with Sopan. And there was a good story which Sopan has written in 2004. And reading that, a number of other journalists have come in, and Minister for Agriculture came and asked whether we can see the village and then talk to them. And then he came and then he has brought in a lot of agricultural scientists along with them and then said, is it possible? And they all said, yes, it was made possible in this village, but on a large scale, it's difficult. They said, this large scale is very difficult. It cannot happen. So in one village we can change, but not in a large scale. Then we went to the Rural Development Department and then spoke with the women self-help group. We said, can we work with them to reduce their cost of applications? And can we reduce their pesticide use by 50%? I said, fine, let's work on that. So we started working there. So the basic principle we used was to create farmers' field schools where people come to the farm and then understand their farm situations and then learn what to do. simple practice there, and then picked up farmers from there and then trained other villages. And quickly, from 2004 to 2010, we could reach out to about 3,000 villages like that. In 3,000 villages, by 2010, the pesticide use could be brought down by over 50%. We were third in the country in terms of per hectare pesticide use, but by 2010, we could bring down the total pesticide use by over 50%, and we were 20th in the country. We were far lower user than Jharkhand and Bihar after in 2010. So that shift came in with a simple intervention where people learn how to understand the things surrounding them and use the resources which they have. So that's a simple thing which we tried out. And but at the same time, government said, okay, in one state you could do, but not in other states. And so the willingness to change was very much. The resistance to change was very much. Then we realized, see, the problem is with our mindsets. So the mindsets exist from top to bottom. The mindset exists at the farmers level, the mindset exists at the officers level, the mindset exists at the politicians level to take a decision. So many of these things are becoming hindrance in terms of bringing out the change. So what we tried is to get the farmers also organize themselves and to cooperate so that they can also take their decisions and then start working whether the government agrees or not, whether the government comes forward or not. So that's one effort which we try to make. And at the same time, we also face with another problem which we have seen. Some of you might have heard about the problem, and then probably still now we are facing it, the GM crops. So BT cotton came in around that time. And simply put it, many of you might have read about it, but simply put it, the technology is instead of spraying pesticide from outside, let's grow pesticide inside the plant. So you introduce a gene so that the pesticide can be grown inside. So that's a simple technology which they made out. But the problem is by inserting the gene, you are disturbing the nature of the plant, and that will have a lot of fallouts. And the industry was not ready to look into the biosafety issues concerned with that. So that they were not ready. So when they were not ready, we were having dialogue, we were discussions, debates, but they were not ready. But BT cotton was released. And so we tried to work with the farmers where BT cotton versus without BT cotton, without using pesticides, and we brought the data to the government, and then we could show the government that this model works. Could get the initial bans on BT cotton, but on a large scale we couldn't get. But at the same time, when the BT brinjal was tried, government tried to introduce BT brinjal, we brought the same thing to the notice of the government, and Jairam Ramesh was the environment minister at the time, and when he was commerce minister, he visited several villages in Andhra Pradesh. So he knows that there are a number of farmers who are growing without using pesticides. So he wrote in his when he brought out, he wrote in his report saying, I could meet farmers who are growing without pesticides, so this is not required. So that also gave us a confidence that if you can do it on a large scale and establish models which can work for the people, somewhere some decision could be impacted on. Somewhere some decision could be impacted on. On the pesticides at the same year, what has happened was the government of India was continuing with a pesticide called endosulfan. Some of you might have heard about that endosulfan and its great tragedy which we created in Kerala. Internationally there was a ban imposed on endosulfan. But government of India argued with the United Nations that in India farmers cannot live without endosulfan. And so that was an argument which Indian government has put in. But we filed a petition saying in India there are a number of farmers who could move out of it, who could bring in a change, and showing that data we can bring in, we can live without using pesticides. But both the reports were put to discussion globally, and finally there was a ban imposed on the endosulfan globally, but without heeding to the Indian government. And Indian government asked for 10 years, and then they continued with selling of endosulfan, on which again a Delhi University students have filed a petition, and that year the ban was again reimposed. So that's how endosulfan came out. So we have seen the legal systems going like that, bureaucratic systems going like that, and also the political systems going like that. At the 2012, again, another major thing which has happened was Amir Khan got into making some talk shows on developmental issues, and one of the things he picked up was on agriculture. And the Sachin Evidence, one of the episodes was on the work which we have done in Andhra Pradesh. And that actually made a big difference in terms of reaching out to the people. Till then, we were trying to talk to the media, talk to the governments, talk to the people that this is possible. But when this show was aired, a lot of people, we could get access to a lot of people. So that the people who are actually in the middle, whom we were trying to convince, we could get over them, and then directly we could get access to the people, and then we could train many of them. In the process, we also learned several things. Like from one village, how we can go into 10 villages, from 10 villages, how we can go into the large number of villages. So that's the journey which helped us to reach out to the large scale. See, in this journey, one more thing which we thought we should be doing was about, if at all, as an organization, we have to go into new area, we should go either if the local people couldn't solve some problem, or there is a serious crisis which we see, which we need to address. One such initiative was in Maharashtra. Near Wardha, there is a village called Doli. If you Google for Doli, you get a lot of interesting stories about it. The villages were completely indebted, and the village was put up for sale in 2005. 2005 December, the village was put up for sale. They said we can't continue with farming. We have so many acres of land, so many houses, so many animals. We all want to leave village, so we are putting the village for sale. And in the end of December, we went there and had a discussion with the farmers, and we said, so we can't repay all your loans, but some of us can help you in terms of solving your problem. And we took them to the village, and then we asked them to stay in a village where we were working, talk to the farmers, and then if you feel confident that we can also do similar kind of thing, we can work together. And 2005, those farmers came back and said, yes, we can work, let's start working. And today, if you see, all the farmers are back to farming. They could repay most of their loans. I think today they are not indebted anymore, except for the annual crop loans. They could repay all their loans. They formed into a cooperative, and today they are able to sell their own produce directly to the consumers. And particularly farmers, they are producing things and then able to sell. So that change also came in when we could engage with them and then try to go with them, and also leave the choice to the people to make their choices. See, many times what happens is we set a condition. Many times, when many of us, when we are going to villages, we believe this is good for the people, and then we tell them this is what you need to do. Or we say, if it is not done this way, you are diluting the practice, or you are diluting the ideology kind of thing. But I think we need to come out of that mode and then leave it to the people to make their own choices, adapt to their situations, move on as they like. They also need to make their own changes, adapt to them. And 2006 to 2016, so almost 10 years down the line, if we look back, the village now is not in crisis. But the Maharashtra government has not learned much about it. We in fact had 2014, we had the Best Rural Innovation Award in Maharashtra for the work we did there. And the government promised that this model will be replicated across, but they didn't come forward. But a number of farmers are coming together, so we are trying to address that and move forward. Another major issue was about the seeds we tried to work on. As you know, in India, after the Patents Act and all, we legally don't approve, as a nation, any patents on seeds, any patents on living forms. But a company got a patent on BT cotton technology. And today, the entire cotton sold in India, is directly or indirectly owned by them. And like initially I said, we were the country which grew cotton when nobody knew about cotton. Today all our patents are from one company and they have an intellectual property over that. So we are trying to find the patents on that and try to come up with an open source system where people can freely share seeds with them. So that's one thing which we tried out, and we are working across the country with many farmers in producing and then selling the seeds. And in the process, when we are shifting towards organic, another major question which we always get is can organic feed the country? Can organic feed the growing population? This is a question which we often hear. Probably also many of you ask that question. But I put the same question another way around. Can chemicals feed the country? Can we continue to supply the same amount of chemicals in future? If you look back on that front, we can't. Because the phosphorus and potassium reserves are already diminishing, and after 20-25 years, probably we may not have enough of phosphorus or potash to apply. So then what? What is the source of phosphorus or potash? There's only two sources. Either recycle the material which you have, plant material, or the human waste. Except for these two, there is no other source of phosphorus and potash which you can use. And 30 years not very far for us. So what are we doing on that front? Similarly, looking at urea, the major chemical fertilizer which is sold in this country is made using the naphtha and coal. And how many years we are going to have the same luxury of using the petroleum products? After 50 years, what are we going to do with that? I think these are the questions which someone needs to ask. Like I said about the water, if we are growing crops which use more and more water, what do we do? Are we going to continue to build more dams? Yeah, you can build a dam, but where do you get water? See, the limitations nature imposes on us, we need to understand. The limitations which nature imposes on us, we need to understand. So that's another major area which one need to look into. Within the limitations which nature imposes, what do we do? Say, if we are talking about a dam, we always talk about how much command area is under the dam, but we never look into what is the catchment area which is required to construct a dam. Unless so many acres of land won't use any water, all that comes into one area, your reservoir will not be full. If all the water is harvested wherever it falls, then you won't need any water in your catchment. So if Delhi wants to get water, around Delhi nobody should use water. I think that's a simple logic around the dams. So localized water processing systems, how do we build? I think that's where Anupamji's work is remarkable. I think that's something which needs to go on a fairly large scale where people can understand and adapt it. Wherever the water drops, how do you use it? And associated with that is also how do you plan your crops based on the water you have. So crop water budgeting is also another very important area which one needs to see. And today that's not the case. So the entire government investment, if you look at, they promote only paddy, sugarcane kind of crops. They are not into crops which use less and less water. Do you know the rice consumes about, for every kg of rice, it consumes about 5,000 liters of water. 5,000 liters of water, which is a tanker of water. So by a family which consumes 1 kg of rice in a day is consuming about a tanker of water in a day. And that tanker is your about 20 days daily use. If you fill a tanker in your sump, you can use it for 20 days for your daily use. But by food, you are consuming more and more. So you are actually eating drinking water. You are actually eating water. So if we don't change our food habits, the things will not change locally as well. And from there, we also try to look at the other dimension of the problem about the economics of the agriculture. So reducing pesticide use, reducing fertilizer use, while it contributed to an extent, another major problem is about the farmers sharing the consumer's price, the food prices which farmers face. You know, if you are buying rice at 50 rupees in Delhi market, how much farmer will get in that? They get about 14 rupees. So what you are paying for 50 rupees, farmer will get about 14 rupees per ton, which is about 20%, near about 20, 22, 23%. The same is the story with every product. low is what I feel. So unless you increase 50 to 60, 70, farmer share will not increase. Second is about how do we bring farmers in direct contact with consumers so that their share can increase. So these are the two things which we started working on. And we started forming farmers cooperatives so that they can directly market their produce. Otherwise, today the situation is the prices in the market will certainly kill the farmers. To give you an example, yesterday I was talking to my farmer cooperative friends and all. The arhar in the market is about 4,000 rupees a quintal. 4,000 rupees a quintal for farmers is what the price which the government of India, which government of Telangana was giving and buying. So the market yard where the price is operating. Minimum support price fixed for that was 5,050. And the cost estimation was 7,000 rupees. So when it cost 7,000 rupees, government fixed a price at 5,050 and actually farmers were getting about 4,000 rupees. And the average yield is about 4 quintals. Just to make a simple calculation, it is 4,000 rupees per quintal and you get 4 quintals. How much you get? 16,000 rupees? A crop of 180 days, if you are getting 16,000 rupees, it is about 100 rupees or less than 100 rupees a day. Without costing your input cost, without costing your land cost, without costing your labor which you employ, simply one person's labor cost also it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. And that's what is the price today. And tomatoes is about 100 rupees a quintal. Onions is about 200 rupees a quintal. That's the kind of prices which are in the market yards in the rural area. That's the situation. It comes from two reasons. One, governments always wanted cheaper food to the people. Cheaper food to the people. And the process of giving cheaper food, government is not investing more. When you are not investing more, you are actually making people who are producing it to bear the cost. The farmers. So farmers are actually subsidizing your food. And we expect that cheaper food will be continuously be available. Will it be available? Go to the supermarket today any supermarket near your house, today the dal prices in the supermarkets are about 80 to 90 rupees. 80 to 90 rupees. If somebody is selling 80 to 90 rupees dal, farmer might have got about 30 rupees in that. I am just calculating the costs, leaving aside the profits. Just to make arhar dal from arhar and pack it and then sell, pay the tax which you are paying, it costs you about that much. So it's about recovery is about 60% packing cost and all. Which means to get us 80 rupees dal, somebody is killed it. And how long we are going to expect that the food will be available cheaper like that? How long we are going to expect that continuously that food is cheaper available like that? So, huh?
For export market, we are
local market, I am talking about local market.
Also, we are making it cheaper.
Local market is also getting cheaper.
For export market, just to get them at a lower cost.
No. It's a local market. Go to the local market and see the prices. I am talking about the local markets. I am not talking about the export market. Look at the local market. That's the issue. And for a long time, all the political parties, when they are in opposition, they make a big huge noise if the prices increase. But they never make any noise when the prices for farmers fall. And as a consumers, we all keep bugging about the increase in the food prices. But why should we always get tomatoes at 2 rupees or 5 rupees a kg? When you film theaters, the tickets gone up to 150 rupees, we never worried about it. But on food, why do we worry about it? If the food prices increases by 10%, 20%. We should worry about how much share of it goes to the farmer, not about increasing the food prices. I think that's a simple thing which we need to worry about. So what we tried out on that front is to organize farmers into cooperatives so that they can sell directly to the consumers. So we started with a consumer cooperative. We brought Hyderabad consumers together, invest some money to buy directly from the farmers and then resell to the consumers without making much money. So meeting the operational cost kind of thing. And this we started in 2009, and we found that works well if we can get more and more consumers to buy it. So we organized farmers also into cooperatives, and farmers and consumers cooperatives across the state, and formed a federation of that. That federation is called Sahaja Aharam. So the Sahaja Aharam produces from seed to final product and sells directly to the consumers. It makes from seed to cloth and directly sells to the farmers. Cloth we have not yet gone into it fully, but this year we are going to get it on experimental basis. We could try out something. This is one of that shirt which we could make from our own partners. So we produce seeds, we produce cotton, and then we also produce. So at the village level. So the idea of village economy revival comes from integrating livelihoods at the village level. Integrating the livelihoods at the village level. Having a dream of a prosperous village cannot be achieved unless we go there and then try and work there. The problem today in the villages is the people are moving over the village. People who are living there doesn't have these skills. So to get the skills back, they are unable to afford to go to a good school and college also. So how do we build those skills and knowledge? How do we build those infrastructure in the village is something which is very, very important, and then that's quite possible. Our experiment shows that today we have 15 stores in Andhra, Telangana together, 15 retail stores which sell farmers' cooperative produce directly to the consumer, and 60%, 50 to 60% of the what consumer pays goes to the farmer. So compared to the 20% which they used to get in the regular market, today they are able to get about 50 to 60%. And still, there is a long way to go. The major issues I try and put before you is the public policy again. So one attempt is at making the farmers understand their resources and change for themselves. Second is engaging with the consumers, directly reach out to them and then redefine and recreate markets. That's the second effort. The third major effort is about the public policy. If you look at right from 1980s, there is a thinking which is floating around, and consecutive governments were saying small farmer agriculture is not viable, and there are too many farmers living on agriculture, so they should be moved out. You might have read Chidambaram saying that, earlier Chandrababu Naidu saying that, several other people have said that. But where do they move? Where do they move? What are the alternative options they are creating? Nobody asked that question. So if you look at between 2004 and 2007, the data shows that about 5.5 crore people would be in the working age, which means about 19 to 60. Between that age, there will be about 5.5 crore people. But 5.5 crore people will be added to the population in the working age. But the jobs created were only about 20 lakhs. So where do the rest of them go? Where do they go? So that's a key issue. You are not generating new employment, you are not creating any new opportunities, and you are putting them in the crisis. That's because the investments in agriculture are going up on the government side. In 1989, it was about 30% of the total budget was spent on agriculture, and last year it was 2.5%. We say near about 54% of the people depend on agriculture, but the budget investment is only about 2.5%. So where do they get support? I think that's a key thing. So how do we raise our voices to build that support is something which is a key issue. Second thing is in the public policy sphere, while green revolution is seen as a success, and the success is attributed to the technology which is used, it is not just technology. Remember, that's the time when banks were nationalized to provide credit to the farmers. That's the time when NABARD was created. That's the time when Food Corporation of India was created to buy, store and sell. That's the time when National Seeds Corporation was built to produce seeds and supply. And that's the time public extension system was built. So all public support systems together have contributed to it. And today we are not investing in any of those things and expect that technology itself will solve the problem. I think that's the issue which is facing the country a lot. And farmers are unable to articulate the problem in a better way in in front of the governments, and the farmer leaders who are in front of us have their own vested interests. So breaking that is something which is a key issue. And in the last 5 years or so, there is another major trend which has begun, and which is a very shocking numbers in front of us. The thing is, lands are getting consolidated. So lands are becoming consolidated. People are buying away land and getting bigger and bigger. Though there is a land ceiling act, though land ceiling act would be there like that, but the number of people who are actually buying away agricultural lands is increasing. And on paper it could be in names of 100 people, but there could be one person who owns all that land. That numbers are increasing. Also, the people who are claiming that they depend on agriculture for their income are also increasing. And they are the people from urban areas. And to tell you two different facts which are in front of us, one is, about 48% of the total agricultural credit given in India today goes to 5 major cities. And you know how many number of farmers would be there in those cities? There's Mumbai, Pune, Chandigarh, Hyderabad and Bangalore. And you can imagine how 48% of agriculture credit goes there. So if governments announce a loan waiver, you can imagine who is going to get benefit out of it. It's not the farmers. And even whatever little investments which are made, the big ticket subsidies are increasing. Big ticket subsidy means, say, earlier subsidy used to be on using a small implement which costs about 10,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees. So those subsidies are all scrapped. But today subsidies are given to build a poly house. It costs about 40 lakhs. So your share is 7 lakhs, you get a subsidy of 33 lakhs. Imagine that 33 lakhs could have solved the problem of some 20,000 people. But you are not worried about that. You are not giving that subsidy to that 20,000 people, but one person can get all that. So that big ticket subsidies are increasing. Big ticket credit is increasing. Big ticket credit is increasing. Loans below 25,000 have gone down drastically. Loans above 2 crores has increased. 2 crores has increased. And in India, there are a number of people who are claiming tax exemptions under agriculture. And last year, 2014-15 year, there were about 6 lakh people who claimed about 889 crores as agricultural income. Agricultural income in India is not taxed. So they claimed. And if you actually calculate, it comes to per acre something like about 5-6 crores. Who are they? Who are they? And how are they getting those incomes? And we have Sharad Pawar in that, we have our Chief Minister in that, there are a number of people like that. So it has become an easy route to get their black money white. And so all these things together are contributing to a situation where has number of small and marginal farmers in poverty. We can use them as an excuse to claim many exemptions and get away with that. And today, if you go to government and ask how many farmers are there, you won't get a list. You won't even get a list. That because there is no way, there is a record. Government is not ready even to put a record on that. That's because if we start listing who is farming in this land, then I have to list many people. And if I have a list on who is owning this land, then I have to list many people. I don't want to. The government is not ready to do. So these contradictions are creating a serious problem in the economy of the agriculture. So prices is one issue, investments which are made in one issue. Third is about the infrastructure support and other support systems which are created. And looking back the earlier things which I told about the ecological farming, the organic farming kind of thing, also is about knowledge-based exemption system which we need to bring in so that things can change. We tried out to get farmers cooperatives in place to work together and then get into the market. The serious problem we are facing is the access to credit. Access to credit. Can you believe if a farmer cooperative goes to a bank and asks for credit, they will ask for 150% non-agricultural assets as a collateral. Say if I need about a crore rupees as a loan, I need to show 151.5 crores non-agricultural asset. where does the farmer gets? And we have about 5,000 farmers who are members of this cooperative, all the cooperatives put together. Their combined net worth would be around, if we calculate the land price, it would be somewhere around 500-600 crores. They are unable to get a crore rupees of income. At the same time, Vijay Mallya's logo could get 100 crores as income. Logo. Kingfisher logo was evaluated at 1,200 crores. The agricultural land 500 acres, 5,000 acres. We couldn't. So that's the contradiction. What is our priority in the government? What is our priority? How are we setting priorities? Is something which we need to ask for. Also, when individual farmers are exempted from income tax, cooperatives are not. So cooperatives, if they have to sell in the market, they have to pay VAT, 4% VAT, and if it is a processed food, they have to pay 14% tax, and if they get any income on that, they have to pay 30% income tax. So in a way, you are actually killing them not to become viable. If this have to change, expecting that farmers can understand and solve their problems is very far. It cannot happen. Many of us in urban areas who can understand these issues have to come together. I think that's where actually the change begins. Some of us who are with an agricultural background came together and pioneered agriculture. But many of you with several other experiences, several other knowledge base, if you can join hands, I think a lot of change is possible. We are trying to build a volunteer group across the country which can help farmers and communities to get out of their problem, build their knowledge base, and then directly reach out to the consumers and the market. That's one side. The other side, try to persuade the government, write about this, talk about this so that we can impact. I think that's something which is very important. So next time when you go to the market, try and buy from the farmers directly. That will help the farmers. So always worry about what is your ecological footprint, so the food which came to your plate, what harm it has caused to the environment, and also how much of what you pay goes to the farm. These two things if you can keep in mind when you are making a choice of your bike. Because see, the market choices are like voting. You are promoting something. So your market choices certainly makes a big difference. Towards it, we'll be very happy to work with you all in bringing a change. Small changes together is what big change is possible. So how we can be the change which we are posting. I think that's is what we need to look for. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. We'll be very happy to answer any questions.